Harper Perennial and HarperAudio present the Alice B. Toklas Cook Book by Alice B. Toklas, with a foreword by M.F.K. Fisher and an introduction by Ruth Reichl. Read by Carol Monda, Romy Nordlinger, and Mark Bramhall.
A note before we begin. For a collection of recipes from friends, which is Chapter 12 in this book, don't forget to download the accompanying enhancement PDF from your audiobook provider, or go directly to www.harpercollins.com/audio/the Alice B. Toklas Cook Book. Publisher's Note to the 30th Anniversary Edition, 1984. "Oh," said Alice, "I couldn't do that." "Why not?" asked the young publisher from New York, who had been trying to persuade her to write a book about her life with Gertrude Stein, and about the many people and adventures they had shared. "Because," said Alice in that cigarette-rough and sensuous voice, "Gertrude did my autobiography, and it's done." Since I could think of no response to that, I must have looked very sad, and since Alice had grown a bit fond of us in the years since Gertrude's death, she thought of something. "What I could do," she said, as tentatively as she was able, which was not very, "is a cookbook, and then it would, of course, be full of memories." She kept her promise. In the extraordinary book she then wrote, she says of the French that, like their Bourbon kings, they learn nothing, they forget nothing. Of Alice it can be said that she learned a great deal and forgot nothing. Into this modest, in size, volume, she put a generous sampling of what she had learned about food and cooking, French and American, as she reinvented it, about the numerous and immensely varied and often very gifted friends and acquaintances whom she and Gertrude attracted, about life in Paris and in the country, about war and occupation, about the USA in the 1950s, about servants, French, Swiss, Finnish, and Asiatic, and, of course, about the celebrated woman who was the love and center of Alice's life. During the writing of the book there were several memorable moments for the lucky publisher, whose sole qualification for having anything to do with a book about food and cooking was a prodigious appetite for food and wine, and a fascination for anything Alice did or said. One such moment came when Alice decided to test several of her recipes on the publisher and her old friend Thornton Wilder. For some reason, probably money, which she then had very little of, despite the immensely valuable things on the walls, Alice decided to do without a maid, which meant the tiny and aging figure spent most of the lunch running back and forth between kitchen and dining room. Wilder, one of the world's politest men, stood up every time Alice did. When she had put a huge platter of fried chicken on the table, and Thornton was still at half-mast, she tried to help him to some chicken, saying curtly, "Thorny, for God's sake, sit down and I'll give you some chicken. Which do you prefer, light or dark?" The great man turned to his sister Isabel and asked, "Which is it I prefer?" "Oh, God," said Alice, "help yourself, dear Thorny," and back to the kitchen. When the book appeared in 1954, it caused a small sensation, partly because of the fuss about hashish fudge, but mostly because of what it was, a unique book by a unique person. Which, of course, is why it stayed in print for 30 years, and why there's this new edition, about which I presume to repeat what Alice once wrote when inviting us to lunch 2 days after we had lunched. The tiny words said, "If this seems too soon to you, remember what the young man said. If perfection is good, more perfection is better."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?